my screen at? Down here any moment. Where is it at? I don't see my head yet. Reset this thing. There we are. Greetings and salutations. It is I, the spiritual entertainer, here with a special guest, a traveler of worlds, crossing barren deserts, the seven seas of the astral planes, a good friend of mine, Gabriel West. And we're going to be talking about druidry, shamanism, and Dungeons and Dragons. Some of you are all getting ready for Friday's night's game. So this is a special time to ask those important questions that you've been waiting to do. Now, I'm glad that you're here. And I would like to ask you, first of all, what drew you, Gabriel, to the path of druidry?
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Father Deacon. I'm delighted to be here. What first drew me to the path of Druidry? I guess if we're going all the way back to the first instance, it would have to be when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I remember going to the library, and I used to love to check out books on mythology, which I was allowed to do as a Christian fundamentalist child, so long as I didn't enjoy it too much, of course. But I remember when I was about 8 or 9, I came across a book called Myths and Legends of the Celts. And that book, for whatever reason, just drew me in more than any of the other books that I had checked out about mythology. And I remember that there were these stories of these gods that I had never heard of, Cernunnos and Tyrannus and all these other Celtic deities. But what stood out to me among the beautiful illustrations of this book most of all was this figure of the druid, this archetypal figure, this you know, gray beard, which I'm working on now, as you can see. They would have these sickles, and they would be shown climbing these trees in winter to try to cut down mistletoe and what have you. And I remember just being completely drawn in by that figure and wanting to know more. Fast forward about probably about 20 years later, I was in the process of searching for a new spirituality. I had found that a lot of what I was raised with just wasn't working for me anymore. And I was out in a nature preserve that I had gone to as a child. And this time I had my own children with me. And it was being out in nature and just getting an absolutely beautiful experience of connection to the forest that I was in that made me realize that the answer that I was looking for was in a nature centered spirituality. And I didn't know what that looked like. But when I started to do a little research, do a little Googling, I saw that one such option, one such earth centered, nature centered spirituality was druidry. And immediately I thought back to that book that I had loved when I was a kid,
Mm.
that I had checked out from the library. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that you could do that. I didn't realize that this was not just an illustration in the book, that this was a living option for people. And after a great deal of thinking about it and researching it, probably another year of discernment or so, I finally joined up with the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. And that's been my spiritual path for close to a decade now.
Did you have any conflicts, like coming out of Christian fundamentalism into druidry? Was there any like alarms going off in the back of your head or struggles?
What a great question. Yes. The short answer is yes. I, just like many young people who are raised in fundamentalist backgrounds, was raised to believe that all of this was quite literally demonic, right? And it took a long time for me to move the belief that it wasn't from here down to here. but none of that was ever coming from the druid side. There was never anything within druidry that made me question like, "Ooh, I don't know if this is really for me. I don't really know if this is okay." But it's just kind of those. It's like the ruts that tires make in a dirt path over many years, right? Those fears that you were
Mhm. Yeah.
raised to have as a child, they take a while to fill back in after you're no longer putting them there. So yeah, it took a little while. It took a little while. There was a lot of hesitation there, but I'm glad that I persevered because it's been so spiritually enriching ever since.
Do you still have echoes of it at all?
No, it's been what a great question though. It's been a few years. I'm trying to think of the last time. No, it's been quite some time. What's my favorite holiday made up by humans? Well, they're all made up by humans, right? So, I've always had a special affinity for the winter solstice. I don't know if that answers your question, Steve.
Yeah, that's coming up in another month and a half.
I'm looking
It
forward
seems
to it.
like
I
a
always do.
long
Uh,
haul from Samhain to what do we call it in the Druidic tradition? Is it Yule or something? Some other special name?
So yeah, so lots of folks I know just call it the winter solstice, but the name that the Druid tradition gives it is Alban Arthur, which is really cool. Alban Arthur means the light of Arthur, and so there's a
Mm,
link there with that idea, and you catch this in a lot of Arthurian legend, but that idea that Arthur is the once and future king, and that he didn't die in that last battle, that his ailing body was carried away to Avalon, but that he'll return someday when the land will have need of him. And so, within the winter solstice, within Alban Arthen, there is, of course, the longest night of the year, the darkness that
mm.
covers the earth. But there's that light within the darkness. There's that promise that summer is coming back. And I've always found that to be absolutely beautiful. And I also like chillier weather. So,
Oh, right, right. Especially here
yeah, for
in the
sure.
swamps of Florida, right?
That's right.
Um, yeah, that's a beautiful legend. It's connected to many different types of mythology. Now, do
It
you
is.
see Druidry in other people's religions or mythologies?
Say that. Will you say that one more time? I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that last part of the
Do
question.
you see like the practice of Druidry in other religions or mythologies?
Well, I'll say this. Modern Druidry is about 300 years old, and it was started in primarily what we now call the UK, right? And for a lot of reasons, it's best to understand it as a spiritual reaction against things like the Industrial Revolution, against things like cultural homogenization that were coming through from the empire. But within the context that it first arose, the earliest of the modern druids in the 1700s were primarily Anglican Christians. And in particular, there
Mm,
were a lot of Anglican priests who were starting these druid orders.
mm,
So the short answer to your question is there's quite a few druids, even still to this day, who are practicing Christians as well. Now, within the last 75 ish years, I think that the majority of modern revivalist druids, as we call them, would now consider themselves more on the pagan side. But druidry, in particular, of all the what you would now call pagan faiths, has always been open to multiple religious belonging. I've known Buddhist druids, I've known pagan druids, I've known Christian druids, I know atheist druids, and so it's a path that has always inherently been open to people of other faiths. Now you'll notice I keep saying modern druids. Um,
mm.
we're not the same thing as the Iron Age Celtic priests that I read
Sure,
about
right.
in the library book, right? We
Mm,
acknowledge them as sort of an inspiration and as maybe even as a little bit of a cultural heritage. But the truth is, Professor Ronald Hutton, who's an absolutely brilliant historian,
mm,
has some books out on this topic that I highly recommend to anyone that's interested. But I've heard Ronald Hutton say on a couple of occasions that all of the verifiable classical source information that we have about the Iron Age Druids would fit onto about 12 pages of type of fairly large
Oh
font, I
my.
think he says.
Wow, not
So
much.
we're not you know, we're not pretending to know everything or even a lot of things about the Iron Age Celts. We're drawing on them for inspiration. I'm sure if they were here to talk to us, they would say druids and other religions. First of all, what's a religion, right? That's a completely modern
Mm.
concept. But then second of all, no, we just worship Cernunnos and Tyrannus and all these other Celtic deities, Brigid and the Morrigan. I don't think it would make much sense to them, but I think modern Druidry is a purposefully constructed and modern faith. Um, is absolutely okay with all of that.
Now, do you have a
Given,
particular devotion to deities or one deity at all? Or what would you say?
yeah, what a great question. I have a particular devotion to they're pretty popular within Druid circles. Brigid, the Morrigan, Cernunnos. Um,
Mm.
Theologically, I'm a pantheist myself, and so I would see them all as expressions of the one that is divine. But those
Mm,
are
right.
the forms that make sense to me and resonate with me. And I see a couple of great questions. What's your favorite god made up by humans? Steve, I would say again, Bridget and the Morrigan and Cernunnos. Um, yeah. Oh my goodness, so many great questions already in the chat. I don't know if you want me to
Mhm.
try to answer a few of
Do
them or
whatever you
just keep
want.
going on.
Yes, it's your show.
Well, no, it's your show for sure, but I appreciate that. Legends are made up by what humans can't understand. About what humans can't understand. Yeah. So I am a big fan of the Protestant Christian theologian Paul Tillich. And Paul
Okay.
Tillich spoke quite a bit about ultimate reality as being what he called the ground of being or even existence itself. So it's not so much that ultimate reality exists, it's that it is existence. And Paul Tillich said that essentially we have no way of understanding that, right?
Mhm.
He borrowed a term from the philosopher Schelling that it was unprethinkable.
Mm,
And the analogy that I found most helpful personally for that is that if you lived your entire life as a fish, you would have no idea what the hell water is.
right,
Water would
right.
be the existence that you knew. And if you stopped and asked a fish as he was swimming through the Gulf of Mexico, hey, what are your thoughts on water? He would look at you and say, what's water? And to Paul Tillich,
Mm,
that's existence. That's ultimate reality for all of us. It's the water we swim in that we have no idea what to say about it, no idea which words would be best used to express it. But that doesn't stop us from
okay.
coming up with symbols and stories and
Right,
legends and
right,
myths to try to relate to that ultimate reality. And we need that
right.
ability as we search for meaning and purpose in our lives. And so legends are made up about what humans can't understand. Absolutely. And Paul Tillich would even say that that word God, even as a Christian Protestant theologian, he would say that word God is a symbol for ultimate reality, and he would say that the task of the theologian is to revere that symbol
Mm,
because it's holy. It's what we're using to relate to ultimate reality. But in our reverence for that symbol, it's also our task to keep it translucent, to remind people that it's a
mm,
symbol. The moment that symbol gets opaque is the moment it becomes an idol
right.
that leads down fundamentalist paths, if that makes sense.
Yes, there are fundamentalist pagans. I've run into quite a few.
Oh, sure.
They
Yeah,
they
no,
they
we've,
take their myths literally. It's like the word of God.
yeah,
I tell them
well, it's,
I'm a monotheist, Caledwin only. That's it. That's what I do. As you can see
Oh,
here, her beautiful image here. But now I know that I don't believe in the mythology. It just points to the
yeah.
reality, you know.
Was
And
the
some
Celtic
people,
book? Oh, yep. Sorry. Go ahead.
what's that?
Oh no, I was just. These questions are flooding in, and I was gonna.
Oh yeah,
Um,
some of them are inappropriate. Just to, there's a lot of weirdos. Our moderators try to get
on
as much of them, but
on the internet, weirdos. You no.
yes.
Yeah. Was the Celtic Book of Myths and Legend authored by Peter Beresford Ellis by any chance? I don't believe so. I will see if I can look that up while we're chatting, because I seem to recall that the author was a woman, but I'm going to look that up while we're chatting and see if I can't figure that out. Um, I'm sorry, Father Deacon. Go ahead and.
No, go ahead. Yes. Yeah. I talk quite a bit with my people here on the show about the mythologies, and like it is all mythology. The Bible, all of this
Mhm.
stuff. The way that people talk about their gods, they were scared shitless of them, right? And they were all afraid of them. They were all doing sacrifices. Yeah. Modern paganism, uh, we shouldn't. We should build upon what the ancestors have begun, but not repeat their mistakes. I don't believe
I
in being afraid of a deity.
completely agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the book was Celts, Myths, and Legends, and its author was Abigail Frost. And it's a
Oh,
children's book. It looks like it's aimed at about the age that I checked it out. It looks like it's aimed for mid to late elementary school. The illustrations are definitely that gorgeous late 80s, early 90s style, but I think they're still really cool.
all right, right. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting uh, legends, legendary material presented by various people that allows you to see into that world, which we have to make it up most of it because
That's right. Yeah.
most of that stuff, most of that stuff is gone. That I don't know if it was the church that or the Romans that ended all of the culture. I have no idea. Maybe you know better than I do. But so much is lost, and we
Mhm.
have what is propaganda. I get asked when am I going to do the next the what is it called the burning you burn the person alive, the Wicker Man.
Oh,
Wicker
yeah, The
Man.
Wicker Man. Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
said, yeah. I'm still trying to. I tell people the best Wicker Men is when we find Christian fundamentalists. They just light up the sky from beginning to end.
Highly
Yeah,
flammable.
so
Yeah.
yeah, they have all of that holiness within them just burns up the sky.
Mm.
That's when we get our Wickermans going. Most cultures back then they all uh, killed people. That was universal in the Bible. There's many instances of it. It was, and when society evolved, they like, oh, we shouldn't be killing one another. It's not a good idea. Except for the Aztecs, they kept going at it for forever. Up to about was it 600 years ago was when they stopped basically. Um, but in your practice of druidry, going into it, uh, there's also the uh, uh, presentation of shamanism. And what was that like for you entering into that?
Oh, what a great question. Shamanism is something that is pretty heavily in the. I can English, I promise. I apologize. It's been a
All
long day.
right, so no problem at
Uh,
all.
Shamanism is pretty heavily emphasized by the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, which is an order I belong to. And it's a word that's often misunderstood, I think.
Mm,
It's a word that was originally taken from a magico-religious practice that was found in Siberia, and it's been applied to similar phenomena that have been found not universally, like someone like
interesting.
Mircea Eliade. Yeah, Mircea Eliade in the 1950s claimed that it was universal. And I think recent scholarship has
Mm,
pushed back against that and said that, well, it's in a lot of places, but universal is putting too fine a point on it. But when we look at a lot of the world's magico religious practices, you find a similar figure pop up in a lot of places, a figure who is often someone who has been wounded themselves, but has dedicated themselves to healing. So that
mm,
wounded healer archetype is something that you see quite a bit of. Someone who spends a great deal of time cultivating particular practices for the benefit of the community, and in particular, that practice tends to look something like a vision quest, to use one
mm,
phrase.
mm,
It's someone who goes into a particular mental state purposefully in order to be able to travel between worlds. Whether that's taken literally or imaginatively, the idea is that your body is still present, but your mind or your spirit is elsewhere. Sometimes that's to gain knowledge. Sometimes it's to find like the missing pieces of someone's soul. Um, for me
Hmm.
personally, I don't take this literally, but I do think that imaginative and real are not contradictory terms. So
Right.
I kind of borrow quite a bit from Carl Jung's idea of the active
Hmm.
imagination there, and I think that modern shamanic practices are something that are quite encouraged within Druidry, and
Hmm.
I think that within pretty much any Druid order or branch of the family tree that I'm familiar with, you would find, in particular, encouragement of the use of the active imagination.
I like how William Blake presented the sacred
Yeah.
imagination. That
Mm,
we have lost that in our Western culture ever since the Enlightenment and religion and everything. The idea of the imagination just for make believe,
hmm
and that's something I'm trying. I've been trying to you know recapture. Um, in the yoga that I practice, you get rid of the imagination
hmm
because it becomes a stumbling block. So I've come at this. I've been trying to study the shamanism. Uh, what do you think about these YouTube shamans that tell you how to do that? Do you think that is appropriate?
YouTube shamans. I'll confess,
Yeah,
I haven't
there's
actually.
several you there's some they tell you how to go into these states of mind and
Oh,
uh, they play the
um,
music and everything.
I'm not here to judge anybody, but that doesn't strike me as being a very wise idea, just offhand. I think that's the sort of thing that's probably better handled with a good book, or preferably a teacher that can help you with that. But I can't say that I've ever actually watched a YouTube shaman, so I'll reserve judgment until such a time as I've had the pleasure.
There's quite a bit, and I'm in my research trying to figure out what this is. Now, did you have a particular teacher, or was this something you just found in your studies?
Both. I've benefited quite a bit from the OBOD curriculum, and in particular,
Mhm.
the what they call the ovate training. There's an emphasis on shamanic identity and shamanic work, but I'm also really lucky to have a fellow druid as a spiritual director.
Oh, wonderful,
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
That's nice too. Now, could you share like the practice that you would participate in terms of going on these journeys?
Sure. I'll share a little bit.
Mhm.
The order places a great emphasis on not sharing the
Right,
contents of the curriculum unless you've signed up. So,
right.
I will just say quite often it looks like getting into the right frame of mind through, quieting oneself, maybe lighting a candle or lighting some incense, and then kind of going through a bit of a guided meditation to allow the active imagination to go in a different direction from sense perception.
So there's like on this journey, there's a diversity of intent, right? You can commune
Mhm,
with spirit guides, animals.
mhm,
There's you go to receive healing to heal others,
mhm,
finding the wisdom and so on.
absolutely.
Um, is there like any particular like spirit guides or animals that you'll be able to talk about?
I have always found a great deal of affinity for a lot of animals in nature, but probably first and foremost, I would look to the osprey as being an animal that I identify with quite a bit. And
Oh,
it's
really?
interesting. Yeah, yeah, I absolutely adore. Um, just going out into the beach or to a lake here locally and watching osprey fish, it's the only bird that will plunge itself completely underwater
Oh,
in its
really?
dive to
Really
catch fish.
interesting.
Yeah, it's just a majestic sight to behold. And I've always absolutely adored ospreys. And
Mm.
interestingly enough, Carl Jung in I believe it was in the Red Book, but I could be mistaken on the source, so don't quote me on that. But Carl Jung talks about seeing an osprey in a vision, and
Really?
it being a sign from his soul that that which is below must be dragged up above. And
Ah, I
there's all
see.
sorts of integration of the shadow messaging there, and
Mm.
all sorts of Jungian goodness to unpack in that statement. But yeah, that's a really long-winded way to answer your question. Ospreys in particular, I've got a delightful tattoo of an osprey on my leg that
Oh, really?
sadly I
Really?
can't show our viewers, but they'll have to take my word for it that it's there.
Now, in his Red Book, right, he went within himself and had these conversations with these archetypes within. Have you
Mhm.
ever experienced a similar journey like Carl Jung?
Not to the level that he describes in the Red Book. And for your listeners that don't know the Red Book, it's a fascinating look into his life that actually wasn't published until 2009, if I'm not
Oh,
mistaken.
really? Really?
Yeah, if memory serves, I believe his family resisted publication of it for quite some time
No
after his
kidding.
passing because
Interesting.
it's quite a personal book, and I'm not sure that he had ever organized it in such a way that publication was intended. But it's a stunning look into a fairly early period of his adult life, in which he describes a lot of what he's seeing through the use of this active imagination that we're talking about. But if you haven't read any Jung before, I wouldn't recommend it as a first book. But if you've read a lot of Jung and you haven't read the Red Book yet, definitely get your hands on that, and get a physical copy of it too, because the illustrations are important to it. He made the illustrations himself, and so they're
Oh,
also
really? No kidding.
yeah. He also cultivated a life of painting as well, in addition to his psychiatric practice. So very much worth a read, I think.
Yeah, he's definitely been a beneficial person to myself and doing
Hmm.
the shadow work, right?
Absolutely.
Learning. I let my shadow run the show.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. Right, right. Well, that's how you get to the Wicker Man celebration, right?
Yeah, right, right. Now, one of the things that we both have in common is Dungeons and Dragons.
Hmm.
You want to share your history with the game? Because you
Oh
were a
my
Christian
goodness.
fundamentalist. Wait, Christian fundamentalist don't play that. That's the devil's gate.
It sure is, Father Deacon. Dungeons and Dragons, man, when I was a kid, probably about that same age when I was checking that book out from the library, I heard about this game where you could pretend to be a knight or you could pretend to be a wizard and you could go on imagined adventures with your friends to defeat dragons or delve into dark dungeons to find the treasure or what have you. And that sounded like an amazing time. And then I found out quickly thereafter that I was absolutely forbidden from playing that game. That game was a fantastic way to lose your eternal soul or get possessed by a
Right.
demon, and my mother and my youth pastor were both absolutely convinced of that. So I did not have the chance to play Dungeons and Dragons until I was a few years into my career. Actually, I was an
Oh,
adult
really?
already.
Really?
Yeah, graduated from college, all that. And I was speaking to a coworker of mine's boyfriend at a party, and he was talking about the new campaign that he was starting up. And I mentioned, like, oh, that's always sounded like fun to me, and I've never had the chance to play. And he said, well, I've got room in my game. Do you want to come play with us? I think I like kind of like looked over my shoulder to make sure, no one was watching before I said, "Yeah, I would love that. I would love to join that." And so I went and played and had the most fun I'd ever had, and it's been a part of my life ever since. I'm so
Oh,
grateful
really?
to him for inviting me that day. Yeah.
Are you still involved in that campaign?
That campaign sadly came to an end. He moved actually. So, but
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no, but that I'm still friends with him. Still friends with another guy that was a part of that campaign.
Mhm,
The other guy still lives locally, and he'll come to play one shots at my house from time to time. So, but we've all stayed in touch for sure.
mhm. That's a good question for you right there.
Does modern druidry lend from medieval wizardry? Is the wizard a reincarnation of the druid archetype? That is a good question. Thanks for that, chemistry. I think that the wizard and the druid probably both stem from the same archetype. I think that probably in Jungian terms, it would come from the animus archetype. That idea of the wizened old man who is knowledgeable in secret ways or knowledgeable in paths that aren't common knowledge, that sort of idea. I think you see this in Gandalf. I think you see it in
Right.
Merlin. I think you see
Mhm.
it in Dumbledore. I think you see this in lots of places. I don't think that wizardry and druidry are the exact same spin on things.
Mm,
Although, if you look at a lot of Arthurian legend, right, like what's Merlin? Well, he's actually the chief druid of Britain in a lot of versions of that legend, right? And so I do think that there's a lot of crossover, even if they're not exactly the same thing. I hope that answers your question. Who is the author of the Red Book? Carl Jung, C.G. Jung, and Jung is Jung to aid your Google search there.
mhm. This brings up another interesting, the idea of magic. Now, how I understand magic in the context of the Druidic tradition is you are a cooperator with forces of nature and divine beings to bring about completeness, wholeness, change
Mm.
for the good. Am I understanding that appropriately?
Say that one more time while I think about that.
Yeah, well, think of it in the biblical terms. Uh, Cooperators with grace, cooperators
Mm,
with the Holy Spirit. How I understand it is you cooperate with, for instance, Caledwin to bring about like what I'm doing here, the spodic work of being an entertainer, bringing about change and difference in the world, completing, making things whole, in that type of rather than transactional magic, which you find in
mm.
certain types of, for instance, witchcraft and things, where you are making deals, you are making offerings to get somewhere to do this or that, to have something or whatever. Could you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's well put. I think that we all come at this with different frameworks, right? And different sets of beliefs and
Hmm.
different ways of interacting with the world. Um, yeah, I don't tend to be a fan of the transactional, and maybe that is something of a bad taste left in my mouth from the days of believing in substitutionary atonement. Um, that beautiful legacy the reformers left us 500 years ago that didn't actually exist in the first 1,000 years of Christianity.
Right,
um,
right,
but not to get too patristic on you, Father Deacon, I know that
right.
yeah, we're sticking to the topic here, right? But I think that cooperation is a much better way of looking at it. I think that yeah, seeing oneself as an interconnected part of a broader network is always going to be a healthier way of approaching these things than I'm an independent agent, you're an independent agent. Let me give you something in exchange and have you owe me something, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, that's how I see like the idea of the grove. You
Yeah.
go to this place and you are transformed and the environment is transformed, mutual benefiting, changing the reality in a way. You are being changed. The trees, they are being changed.
Hmm.
Just as you exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide, it is a symbiotic relationship where both people benefit. And that is how I see, like, in terms of the growth. Maybe you have different ideas about growth.
No, I think that's well put. I would agree with you.
Right. Now, do you have your own personal grove somewhere?
I do, both in the physical sense and in the active imagination sense. I do have a grove I've developed through the active imagination and spiritual practice within Druidry over the course of my years of practicing Druidry, and I'm delighted to be able to go there whenever I need a break. But I also do have some beautiful old trees in my yard that I've loved cultivating a relationship with since we moved into this house. So,
Yeah, I had an interesting experience when I started practicing Druidry. The idea of the grove came up, and I had a vision of a place. And I'll have to show you the pictures next time I see you.
I would love
But
that.
it was in a place called Hilochi Swamp. It's just down the road.
Mm,
Um, I went there with my boys. We went looking for this place, and probably about a 25-minute walk. You know how the swamps are around here. You can barely walk through them. I came upon this grove of laurel trees, all evenly spaced apart. And in the heart of this grove was a tree with three trunks going up.
mm,
You know, the laurel oak tree is quite uh, universal down here in the southeast.
for sure.
But I thought, uh, beautiful place. I mean, these trees, I've never seen anything like this before. They were evenly spaced apart, differentiated from the rest of the environment. Um, have you seen stuff like that around here in Florida, like trees doing that?
I don't know that I have to be honest with you. I
Yeah, well, I
mean,
just can't figure it out.
where I where I grew up, I'm lucky to be in one of the few parts of the continental United States where banyan trees will grow. And
Banyan.
so banyan trees, yeah, which are absolutely delightful. And as you were describing that, that's kind of the mental image, something similar to that that came to mind. Obviously, very different from what you're describing.
Mhm.
But banyan trees, yeah, banyan trees are spectacular. If you ever get the chance to head down to like the Museum of Fine Arts in St. Petersburg, they've got some beautiful old banyan trees growing out in front.
Interesting.
They don't grow in most parts of Florida. There's just a very narrow stretch, I think maybe like from about St. Pete down to about Sarasota or maybe Venice ish. They're spectacular, and there's some biological connection. I don't remember the precise details, but there's some
Mhm.
biological connection with the Bodhi tree, if I'm not mistaken, that the Buddha is said to have sat under as he
Interesting.
reached enlightenment. Yeah.
Interesting. There's a question about the Morrigan. Do you know anything about her?
Oh, is she akin to the banshee? So that's a great question. The word banshee in the Irish language is banshee. It basically means a woman of the fae, and
Hmm.
there is a strong connection. Um, all of these things are oral traditions that got written down later, and we don't know the precise, was the Morgan herself a banshee? Were the banshees inspired by her? We don't really know, but I do think that there's a connection between those two. Yeah,
Hmm.
uh, they're not dissimilar at all.
I
Um,
like how some of the mythology, like the Morrigan becomes her own mother and aunt. When you
yeah,
connect all the mythology together, because it's all scattered.
absolutely,
It's all scattered. There's
absolutely,
various sources. Yeah. Now,
absolutely.
in terms of trees, you say you have a relationship with trees. Now, um, in my experience of the tree, that they do not have the same type of spirit that we possess. They have their own unique spirit, their own language, and
Hmm.
in order to comprehend that, there needs to be a mediator between that translation. I could be wrong, but I know that they can feel the emotion. Like what any type of plant, it is scientifically proven. I love you. You're wonderful, and they grow healthy. And he's like, you are garbage, and then they die. I mean, that is
Hmm.
already been proven. What is your experience in terms of the communication with trees?
That's a great question. I had this experience a few years ago. That I think illustrates well how I find we relate to trees, because it's not verbal, right? Because as you said, like there's a language barrier to put human terms on it, right? Um, as part of the OBOD curriculum, I was asked to go out and find a tree somewhere nearby to connect with. And at the time, I was living in a town, not in Florida, that I felt very much like an outsider in, very much felt like I didn't belong, very much just hated it, was ready to move on, did move on a few months after this experience, was absolutely miserable. And as I was walking around looking for a tree to connect with, just keeping my heart and my mind open as best I could to the experience, came across a tree that I felt a real strong affinity for, and just spent some time next to it, talked to it, really found my spirits lifted, really found uh, some calm and peace in a time when I needed calm and peace quite a bit. Um, couldn't for the life of me figure out what it was. I went home and I downloaded an app that's supposed to help you like identify trees. And the app, this was very early
Mm.
stages in those kinds of app. The app couldn't figure it out. And I was like, well, I don't know. And I'm looking through books of like local trees and stuff like that. It's not any of the books. I'm like, this is strange. I finally identified it, and it was an invasive species.
Oh, really?
And I was like, "Oh, that's why we get along. Neither one of us
Right,
is where we should be."
right.
Um, so that was a pretty fascinating experience to me. I didn't have anything that you could describe as like a verbal relationship with the tree, and I'm not sure that I don't discount other people's experiences, but for me, that's not how I relate to trees. But there was definitely an emotional connection there that made a whole heck of a lot of sense once I figured out what was going on.
Yeah, I think that in my experience, I don't know if it was just my excitement, but uh, like how you want to be with a lover when you fall in love, and that like
Hmm.
of desire to be there, like drawing me to it. Not like loving it, but just that uh, call to intimacy. Do you experience something similar to that?
I think so. I think that's a good way of describing it for sure.
Yeah, yeah. This now on the other end, the animals. Do you have such experiences with animals as well?
Yeah, I've had quite a few experiences like that, particularly out bird watching with my son, particularly when he was a little bit younger. I would go out birding, and I would go if I was by myself, I'd go hours without seeing any birds or not birds that I was interested in seeing, right? And then I would go out with my son who was a bit younger at the time, and all of a sudden, we'd see all sorts of amazing birds, species we'd never seen before, incredible specimens of birds that we were just like blown away by that would get really close to us and allow us to take great pictures. And I was like, oh, the birds want to show off for the little guy. Okay, that's interesting. But so being out and feeling connected to those birds in particular, and being grateful that they were willing to show off for my kid and help him fall in love with nature too. That's been the experience that stands out the most in my mind of what you're talking about.
Mm. Right. Now you mentioned you're a pantheist.
I am,
I,
yeah.
I would consider myself a panentheist. Just a step.
Sure.
You're familiar with
Yeah,
panentheism, right? Now,
absolutely.
one of the reasons. Now, this might seem like a silly question.
No,
Over in India, there's a certain set of gurus
sure.
that they are pantheistic, and they wipe their shit all over their faces and stuff. You know, how do you
Yeah,
cope
yeah.
with that? I mean, is God shit? It
Oh,
is for
wow.
them.
Wow,
Yeah,
wow, 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 wow. Yeah, we're getting right into the thick of it, aren't we? No, so I don't there's varieties of pantheism out there, right? And if you're looking
I
for a
see.
if you're looking for a fantastic book on pantheism, I can't recommend to you enough. There's a book by Mary Jane Rubenstein called Pantheologies. And
Mm,
Pantheologies is a book that was absolutely crucial to my developing understanding of pantheism. And she talks quite a bit about, in the West, we tend to only see that sort of uh, that caricature of Hindu pantheism. I don't want to say caricature. Maybe that's the right word. Maybe it's not.
Mhm.
But this view of pantheism that Advaita Vedanta is the one branch of Hinduism that most Americans have come some familiarity with, and it's really a shame because Hinduism is quite a diverse religion. But
Right.
Advaita Vedanta has this version of pantheism as there's only one thing, and that
Mhm.
one thing is the all, the Brahman, the one, and all difference is Maya, all difference is illusion, right? The material world is illusion. That's not my pantheism. That's not where I'm coming at
I
from.
see.
My
I
my
see.
pantheism would be much more heavily influenced by like a William James, who talked about a pluralistic pantheism or sometimes even a polytheistic pantheism, where it's
Interesting.
not that there's only one thing, it's that the things in the one are so deeply united and interconnected that that's what comprises divinity, is that infinite interconnection between all things. And so and this is not, I want to say really clearly here, this is not, I'm not speaking on behalf of all druids, right? Like,
Right. Right.
there's an infamous joke, and depending on who you ask, you get different versions of the joke. But it's something like, ask 10 druids a question, get 11 different answers. Within druidry, there are monotheists and duotheists, like you see in Wicca. There's polytheists, there's panentheists, like yourself. There's pantheists. So I'm speaking as Ryan. I'm not speaking as
Right.
representative, right, of druidry. Um, I, within my pantheism, don't see the category of the supernatural as making a whole lot of sense. I think that
Mhm.
nature is what there is. Nature is outsideless, to use the phrase
Mhm.
from the wonderful pantheist thinker Robert Corrington, who I also recommend if you're in for a book that's a bit more of a difficult read. He wrote a book called Deep Pantheism that's also just ties together Carl Jung and pantheism quite
Interesting.
beautifully. Um, Pantheism, in that sense, like I said, is a seeing of the interconnection of the world and seeing us all as participants in divinity in that way, rather than saying there's one thing and
Mhm.
any sort of plurality is Maya or illusion. That's where I'm coming at this
Mhm.
from. As in terms of
Sounds like
rubbing,
Sophiology a little bit.
it sounds like what?
Sophiology, like Sophia
Sociology?
being the root of
Um,
creation.
Maybe,
It
although
depends on whose Sophiology.
yeah, I was gonna say I tend to have Gnostic connotations to that word in my mind, and I'm not
Well, this
sure
is a
that.
different Sophia. Yeah, it's a
Okay,
different
yeah, yeah,
Sophia.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for
That there's
sure.
a living reality that is the not creation, but the root of creation.
Hmm.
The interconnectedness of all being is in the divine wisdom in the Sophia as a maternal
Hmm.
reality that binds all things together. So at the
Hmm.
source of all of this here, there's an inner reality. Uh, going into the Hermetical tradition, that there's only one universe. There's not
Hmm.
like supernatural or a place in the sky called heaven.
Yeah,
There's
very,
boundaries,
yeah,
but the
very much a one
boundaries, if
story,
you have the right equipment, if you have the right
very much a
equipment, you
one
can
story
go like
universe
right
rather
now.
than a two-story universe,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, yeah. That's the beauty of. There's so many ways you can go about learning about these great mysteries, and I don't claim to have always right. I'm just a journey trying to
Hmm.
understand all of this interesting stuff. At the heart of it, I
Definitely,
know that
definitely.
I'm loved by whatever brings. Have you experienced that harmony, that unity, that love in your walk?
Yeah, I, yeah. To go back to Blake for a second, though, whose poem "The Tiger" is a touchstone for me. And he queries the tiger, did he who make the lamb make thee? And it's such a powerful moment of coming to grips with not just the peace and harmony of nature, but the brutality of nature. And that violent side of nature, that side of nature that we don't want to talk about when we're watching a delightful National Geographic documentary in front of the kids, where it's all peaceful and harmonious and things like that. I do think that nature has a dark side to it. And this borrows heavily from Robert Corrington, like I said earlier, where he talks about, Jung says that we have a shadow, nature's got a shadow too. And that follows pretty closely on realizing that we're part of nature. And so I don't want to romanticize nature. I don't think that, the 19th century romantics did us too many favors in that regard, because I don't think that nature would return to like a Disney movie state if we just left it alone, everything like that, right? But I do feel that when I am connected to nature, I am connected to where I belong. And I feel love
Mhm,
within that framework. And I
mhm,
feel love as a part of what it means for me as a human being to be interconnected with nature. And I do love nature, but I don't romanticize nature or think of it as being like, well, I've replaced Father God with Mother Nature. I don't think that's quite how it works.
mhm.
Nature's
Yeah,
chaotic,
there's
much like everything in life. Yeah, I think so too, Rafna.
yeah,
Chaos flows through all things, yeah.
chaos flows through all things, and chaos is not a bad thing. It is
No.
something that calls for order in a way that creates beauty when you merging those two forces together.
Yeah,
You
there's
know, you see that
there's
in
the
Dungeons and
dynamic.
Dragons, right?
Yeah, there's the dynamic interplay between those things. Yeah, absolutely, with Dungeons and Dragons, right? You make a plan and no plan survives first contact with the players, and the dice have a mind of their own and all that, right? Yeah, I think that one of the mistakes that forgive me for saying his name, but I think are like Jordan Peterson, who is polluting the airways and here on Al Gore's internet with all sorts of misrepresentations of Jungian thought and stuff like that. But he's got this fixation on correcting chaos with order, and it's like,
Right.
brother, chaos and order are in an eternal dance, and the moment you think that you
Yeah.
can
Right.
conquer the one or the other, you're due for some imbalance there. So, I'm not opposed to, he's
Mhm.
got this fixation on like, oh, young men need to make their beds and all that stuff, right? And I'm like,
Ah,
okay, yeah, make your bed, but don't think that you've conquered primordial chaos by making your bread and brushing your
ah,
teeth regularly and all that stuff, right?
right. Yeah, I see that like a modern environmentalism in terms of nature. It where they go wrong is they just make it's not a spirituality, it's a guilt trip. You
Hmm.
know, making everyone feel bad. You know, I'm going to fly my private jet. I'm going to go plant some trees. It's like I just raped someone. Now I'm going to go plant a tree. You know, they
Hmm.
don't get it. It is not a spirituality. And I think
Hmm.
that if we are able to, bring people into the leaders of this, like the Greta, right, to integrate a spirituality in it, it would be more of an invitation for the world rather than, because people don't like guilt trips. You know,
Right.
I consider myself a de facto member of PETA because I eat chickens. You know, I'm working my way there as a spirituality rather than
Mhm.
I'm feeling guilty for doing this because I believe that animals, they have the same destiny that we do. We are all connected, and we benefit from loving our animals. I hopefully one day we won't be able to eat them anymore, but that is a long way off. I
Mhm.
can never be a regular member of PETA because all of the vegans have hijacked PETA, unfortunately. Um,
Sure.
but where are we at here? Now, going into bringing are you good on time? Oh, I forgot. I should be courteous about that.
Oh, I could probably do another 10 minutes or so if that's all right.
All right. Yeah. Going into this aspect of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, you have uh, in your tables, you know, what your spiritual experiences, bringing that
Oh,
into the
goodness.
table experience. What is that like?
Yeah, yeah. I have had so many profound experiences playing tabletop role playing games. And at first, the spiritual experiences were quite accidental. And then later on, they've become something that I'm purposefully cultivating. But going back to what we were talking about earlier with shamanic journeying as being something that is expressed as a part of the active imagination, and your body is still physically present, but your mind is going to other places to obtain knowledge or to bring back healing or what have you. um, what better use of the active imagination is out there than a
Mhm.
tabletop role-playing game, right?
Right.
And so I have found that when I am designing one shots or campaigns for my players with a bit of intentionality to do that kind of journeying, that my players can take those journeys on their own behalf and find
Mhm.
quite a bit of healing. And I'm just there as the guide, the referee, because that's really all at the end of the day, all a dungeon master is, right?
Right.
I found a lot of different tabletop role playing games work for that quite well. Dungeons and Dragons is obviously the most well known. It was the first tabletop role playing games, but there's an entire universe of gaming options out there that are useful for different types of shamanic playing. In particular nowadays, and this is in the infancy stage for me, so I don't have a whole lot to talk about with this yet, but one of the things I'm exploring right now is tabletop role playing games as shamanic journeying to uh, deal with climate grief, and
Mm.
deal with the existential angst a lot of us are feeling about
Mhm.
global warming and things like that. There are a variety of games out there. I'm not using Dungeons and Dragons for that, but there are a variety of games out there that I'm exploring. One of them is this brilliant game called The Wild Sea that imagines a world that is 300 years post apocalypse, in which,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, it's the apocalypse is an event that's called the verdancy. And the verdancy is
Mm.
essentially nature takes the earth back over from us. Nature sends forth this almost instantaneous growth of trees that completely subsume all of our major cities. Civilization is over in an instance. And now all dry land is just completely covered with several hundred feet of trees and bushes and other plant life. And the Wild Sea imagines that humanity is now surviving kind of in the canopies of those trees and it's kind of sailing back and forth across the
Interesting.
top of those trees. And so I'm exploring using that game as a way of decentering the human perspective from our experience of nature and as a way of dealing with climate grief by way of helping us to recognize that uh, Earth's story isn't just the human story.
Mhm.
That we can find hope and we can find resistance in the idea that nature will take back its own when it's ready to, and
Mm.
we aren't necessarily, our end or civilization's end isn't going to be the end, if that makes sense.
Right. Now, have you had any like uh, feedback from your players at your table, stories that you'd be willing to share about how it's affected them in terms of their experience?
Oh goodness, yeah, yeah, let me think if there's one that I'm able to share. I don't want to betray any confidences for my players, but I'll say that many of them have talked about finding a great deal of personal healing at the table. And a lot of it has to do with being given that opportunity to engage in active imagination, also being able to engage in play. I think that
Mhm.
play is something that we have eradicated from adult life in modern society, to a really unhealthy degree. I think that play is this beautiful gift that we've gotten from evolution. We see it. Um, we only see play in species where the young are afforded time to pursue what are called autotelic pursuits, pursuits that are their own goal, right? Pursuits that don't necessarily contribute to day-to-day survival. It's only when the
Right.
young of a species have the opportunity to engage in an extended period of time, whether it's a few days in the case of some bird species, or a few years in some mammal species, 18 years or so in the human experience. It's only when we're afforded time to pursue autotelic activities that play evolves. And so it's a pretty rare gift from evolution. And I agree with the scholar Johann Huizinga that play is actually the foundation of all human culture
Mhm.
and all human civilization. And so I think, as we see ourselves kind of pulling civilization apart here to a certain extent, here
Right.
live on Al Gore's internet, right? A lot of it has to do with the fact that we don't know how to play anymore. And now we've started
Right.
to move into removing play from childhood, even. And that's
Mhm.
something that the pop psychologist Jonathan Haidt has done an effective job communicating, I think, in works like his book, The Anxious Generation. That's a really long winded way of coming about to this idea that
Mhm.
part of what's so gosh darn healing about TTRPGs, and part of what makes them so rife with potential for shamanic work,
Mhm.
is it's playing. It's imaginative play.
Right.
And that
Right.
connects us to a deep part of ourselves, maybe a part of our childhood that we rush through too quickly, a
Right.
part of what it means to be a human in a culture and a society that we have stomped out to a large
Mhm.
degree, and it's reconnecting ourselves with ourselves. And so when you think about that shamanic image of going on a journey to find the missing pieces of the soul, is one common story of the shaman goes. I think you find missing pieces of your soul when you engage in play.
Right. Right. Now, heading towards the end here,
Yeah,
what would you have to say to people who are interested in Druidry?
I would say that I would love to give you a piece of advice that was given to me when I was doing the path by a more experienced druid, which is the best thing that you can do is go outside, spend time in nature, practice, being out in nature, leave your phone in the house, just go outside and observe and center yourself on nature. Because at the end of the day, we've had a great time talking about different theological perspectives and philosophical perspectives, and different things that druidry can give us. At the end of the day, though, what unites druids, whether we be polytheistic, pantheistic, pantheistic, Christian druids, Hindu druids, Buddhist druids, atheist druids, is this common desire to center our pursuit of meaning, center our spiritual lives on the natural world and on this experience of the green earth that we've been so lucky
Mhm.
to get. So if you're interested in druidry, my first piece of advice is go outside, go for a walk, see what's growing in your area, see what animals you can see. If you're close to a body of water, go spend some time by the body of water. Just listen, just open yourself up to the experience. And then after that, if you're still feeling pulled in this direction, there are so many great resources out there for people who are interested and who are new to the practice of druidry. The OBOD website is a fantastic place to go. That's OBOD, the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. I don't remember the website offhand, but it's the first thing that pops
Mhm.
up when you Google it. A book that a book that I recommend to a lot of new folks. This guy drives me nuts in a lot of ways, but John Michael Greer's The Druidry Handbook is still
Mhm.
one of the best books for beginners that I've come across. Politically, he's not my cup of tea. He's a very pleasant
Oh,
person to
really?
interact with. Yeah,
Oh,
I've had a few exchanges with him online.
he's the American.
He is American. Yeah,
All right.
yeah. He's an incredibly gracious and kind person to interact with online, and he's actually been helpful to me individually on several occasions where I've reached out to him with questions that I had about various things.
Good.
He's super generous with his time and his wisdom. um Politically, he drives me absolutely bonkers. Like, I cannot stand his
Oh,
political
no.
views, but don't, The
Yeah.
Druidry Handbook, his introduction to Druidry, not to be confused with his Druidry Magic Handbook, which is a completely
Oh, I
different book
see.
that I wish he
I
had.
see.
I wish he had titled differently, but the Druidry Handbook is a fantastic beginner's book. The Path of Druidry by Penny Billington is another one. If you're into something with a little bit more Welsh flavor, Christopher Hughes wrote a book about Druidry. Christopher Hughes, and that's Christopher with a K, not a C. Christopher Hughes is the head of the Anglesey Druid Order over in Wales, and he's a native Welsh speaker and just a fantastic human being. I really enjoy his books. His Druid path is a little different from
I got
mine
his
because
Caradwen book. I've been reading
oh,
it.
I've heard that's excellent. I haven't had a chance to read that myself. His book on death and dying from a pagan perspective, which is called As the Last Leaf Falls, I think. That's 10
Hmm.
out of 10. Can't recommend it enough.
Really? Really?
But his perspective on Druidry is very heavily centered on Welsh culture, Welsh language, Welsh deities, as it should be. He's a native Welsh speaker.
Mm.
Um,
Right.
so, I don't find myself recommending his Druidry book quite as much, just simply because I'm not Welsh. Most of the people
Yeah,
I
he
talk
really
to aren't
puts it in
Welsh.
the Caradwen book.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I'm
he's
just
not shy
skipping
about
over
it.
it.
And he's a
Yeah.
delightful human being who you should
Yes.
read and listen to podcast interviews with, regardless of your level of interest in Welsh culture. But any books by Philip Carr-Gomm are going to be great resources. I'm trying to think of who else. The Book of Head Druidry, whose author's name escapes me at the moment. Sorry, it's been a long day.
That
That's
one
another
lady,
great.
she's a Wiccan. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of great resources out there for
Yeah.
beginners, but start by going out in nature,
This
then
was
go to
my
the
first
OBOD
book.
website. Yep, that's it. That's it. Start by going out into nature. Start by opening yourself up to the natural world. If you're still interested, then go to the OBOD website. Then consider reading one of those books that I mentioned third. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, it's for everyone too. I was surprised to see a Christian fundamentalist on the Obed website.
Joanna Vanderhoven is the author. Thank you, Vixus. I appreciate that. You're absolutely right.
Oh, that was quite a surprise to me. They were complaining about the magic of Druidry. This is too Wiccan for me. The Bible says that witches should be burnt. I was so
Mm.
surprised to see that. I didn't realize that there were Christian fundamentalists within Druidry. Have you encountered any?
Within Druidry, no. No. The Christians I've encountered within Druidry are all pretty open, tolerant people.
Interesting.
Oh, well.
Well, at every show, I have to ask people, are you willing to accept Ceridwen as your personal maiden, mother, and crone? Will you open your heart to the goddess? Come to the cauldron.
Oh, that's
Come.
amazing.
She stands at the door and knocks. Come before it's too late. Before
Well,
Gloin takes it all for himself.
I don't want to give some of your commenters here an aneurysm because my goodness, you warned me in advance here, Father Deacon, but some of your folks on here do are very concerned for the state of our eternal souls. But
Yes,
yes, I
we're
will
going to
accept.
hell.
I would accept Caradwin's invitation. Thank you very kindly for extending it to me.
See, Christian fundamentalists, you can accept the goddess too, if you want. All
She stands at the
right,
door and
I
knocks,
appreciate.
right?
Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh,
Thank
I'm
you
so
for
grateful
all
for
your
the
wisdom, and
invitation. Yeah,
um, a lot of people love it. They're really enjoying you being here. You have such wonderful knowledge,
that's
and
kind of you to
I
say.
look forward to seeing you again in a few months.
Looking forward to it as well, Father Deacon. Thank you again for the
Uh,
invitation and blessed be.
This would be. Take care.
See ya.